You're creating a culture where this is acceptable.
Ooh, I can't believe, yeah.
Boom, he just felt the need to just take off on me. I wasn't even a threat to him. Why did he punch me?
I didn't swing, I didn't slap, I didn't do anything violent. It's insane. It's insane that this stuff happens.
I've seen some of these officers, just one punch, just lay them out. Jesus.
You're seeing 10, 20, 30 head strikes. There's something wrong.
A strike to the head carries a risk of death.
He took something dear from me. Very, very dear to me.
Sheriff, you rarely discipline these detention officers. Why?
It seemed very routine to them.
Business as...
It's business as usual.
As we speak, it's going on right now, I can guarantee it.
And it's not gonna change unless you do something proactively to change it. Make changes. Stop this behavior. It's not okay.
Do something.
I'm Jeremy Rogowski. We spent more than a year battling for records, some 3,000 reports to learn what goes on inside the Harris County Jail. They reveal details of disturbing behavior. Detention officers punching hundreds of inmates in the head for things the sheriff himself admits were not warranted. We also got hold of videos not seen before. They paint a picture that isn't pretty. Excessive force, unnecessary force, even what some call flat-out abuse. This is Struck.
It's nothing like honest living, man.
Life on the outside brings life lessons that run deep.
Yeah, man, it's a hard job, but it's fair.
For Elton Spicer, an honest day's work
Actually doing something
Restoring what's broken
worthwhile.
keeps him on the straight and narrow,
Keep you out of trouble.
keeps him from thinking.
about the past.
It was here in the Harris County Jail a couple of years ago when Spicer, held on a robbery charge, spoke up about a group of detention officers in the hallway, repeatedly punching another incarcerated man.
So we was all at the door just looking, looking. And, I said something about, man, hey, man, let up off of them, let them make it. And, that's when they told me to get back, shut up, you want some too?
A short time later, officers enter the cell block and begin to handcuff inmates. One of them approaches Spicer.
I tell them, man, I don't want no problems, man. I'm chilling. I go to walk off. I put my hands in the air.
In the air, he says, to surrender.
I got 2-3 officers on me already. Boom, he just felt the need to just take off on me, punch me for no reason. I wasn't even a threat to him. Why did he punch me?
A blindside blow, sending the 270-pound Spicer stumbling to the floor, leaving him a bloody mess.
I think it's ridiculous. Like, if you don't have no reason to punch somebody in the head, what you doing that for? I mean, is that what they train them to do? That's terrible.
Ana Cervantes lived through a similar ordeal.
I think I'm still in shutdown mode right now. I think I've just been through a lot and I'm a little traumatized, and it just felt horrible.
Cervantes was in the Harris County Jail for a felony DWI charge.
I was going through a mental breakdown at that time.
That's her in the middle, standing alone in a gaze.
I don't understand why it happened. They clearly just come in. I'm just standing there.
Detention officers come in, according to this report, after complaints that Cervantes had been grabbing onto other inmates. When they arrive, They claim her fists were clenched and balled up.
Were you balling them up as if you were going to swing?
I always have my hands like that. My hands are always usually just closed. It's something natural.
As they attempt to walk her out, Cervantes grabs an officer's uniform, and in return, this. Punched in the head, tackled, then punched some more.
So, I mean, watching that, what are the words that come to mind?
Speechless and shocked. It's obviously gotten out of control.
But in this case, Anna was the one charged with a crime, assault of a public servant.
I didn't throw a punch, I didn't swing, I didn't slap, I didn't do anything violent. And
You're the one that got charged.
it's insane. It's insane that this stuff happens.
Here at the Harris County Jail, there's a report written every time force is used, explaining who did what and why. We fought for these records, and they reveal a pattern. Inmates getting punched in the head under questionable circumstances.
It happens nearly 4 times a week.
Well, I've got to say that I was pretty horrified by so much of what I read and saw.
Michelle Deitch runs the Prison and Jail Innovation Lab at the University of Texas. Its focus, the safe and humane treatment of people in custody. Deitch has spent years researching and writing best practices and standards for use of force.
Is there ever a time a blow to the head is okay?
Head strikes should be employed extremely rarely, only when there's an imminent risk of serious bodily harm or injury. They should really be thought of closer to a form of deadly force.
Deitch says the reason is clear. Unlike punching someone's arm or leg, a closed fist blow to the head can cause lasting damage.
Risks of concussion, risk of traumatic brain injury, risk of eye injury.
Yet over the past 4 years at the Harris County Jail, we identified 810 head punching incidents for things like inmates refusing orders, making verbal threats, or taking a fighting stance.
Jumping to a form of very risky force, a head strike, in response to something that is not posing an imminent risk of harm, is an over-response.
Can I show you some of this video here?
Yeah.
Take the case of inmate Brian Neal Williams, who had words with a detention officer after asking for a blanket to go to sleep.
I said, can I get a blanket? Can I get a blanket? Well, he was using profanity at me. He was yelling at me. He was like, Jesus, sit your ass down.
The officer, more than twice Williams' size, unleashed.
He was very aggressive. Yes, he was. He was very aggressive. He got me real good.
But Williams is the one who got charged and serving time for assault.
I just can't comprehend it.
Steve Sinclair spent his career in the prison system.
That's not assault. The assault came when the officer started throwing blows at the individual's head.
Sinclair has seen it all in his 30-plus years at the Washington State Department of Corrections, starting as an officer, retiring as the agency head.
In my experience, head strikes are reserved for the most severe of instances.
Not for things, he says, like grabbing, pushing, or even spitting at a detention officer.
Having someone spit on you is disgusting and awful, and I've experienced it myself, but it's not justification for force at that level.
Here is a case where detention officers say an inmate spit at them. They punch him more than 10 times.
No, I'm not supposed to.
It's not fair, you say?
That's not.
Not when the son of Roberto Alvarez was outnumbered 8-1.
But that's not right. I mean, that's not right.
Both experts say most of the head strike cases they reviewed could likely have been avoided.
It's called de-escalation. That's using verbal tactics, the tone of your voice, the rate of your speech, to see if you can de-escalate the situation.
Instead of ramping it up.
Everything was about trying to make things worse. It was getting in people's faces.
For Michelle Deitch at UT's Prison and Jail Innovation Lab,
I was stunned in virtually every single case I looked at. There was nothing that I would consider de-escalation. Everyone's itching for a fight in almost every case that I saw.
Elton Spicer knows it, he says, because he lived it. After his jail beating, Spicer filed a grievance with the sheriff's office
Honorable Judge Unger.
and wrote a letter to the judge handling his robbery case.
I was assaulted by at least 4 officers here in the Harris County Jail.
None of those officers ever got disciplined.
I mean, they're not getting in trouble for it, they're not being punished for it, so why not keep punching them in the head? It's messed up, man.
I'd worked with some of these officers, and they're angry. They're burnt out. They're furious.
He's a man who spent 2.5 years working on the inside, working in and witnessing a culture.
A lot of these officers are frustrated and burnt out, so they take it out on prisoners as a punching bag.
A punching bag. But worse, David Batts says, many are proud of it.
The more use of forces you have, the more bragging rights you have, and that's basically how it always is.
They would brag about it.
Absolutely.
Bragging about beating inmates. Batts recalls one story that haunts him still.
Everybody was talking about it, and I mean, everybody was talking about it. And, you know, I was like, what are you guys talking about? Well, have you not seen the video? I'm like, what video?
This video of a detention officer knocking an inmate out cold. One of many, he says, shared among the ranks.
I mean, they would literally be talking about it in the parking lot, or they would sit over here and talk about it in the break room. Like, hey, I did this and this and that. You saw the video, you saw my video. I'm like, Jesus, you guys are actually proud of hurting people?
It's a culture, Batts says, fueled by many factors. A jail short-staffed, overworked, and underpaid. But most of all,
they don't hold anybody accountable for any of their actions. These officers can do whatever they want.
The numbers tell the story. Over 4 years at the Harris County Jail, we identified 810 cases of questionable head strikes, but only 10 detention officers disciplined for delivering those blows.
It's creating a culture where this is acceptable behavior.
A toxic and dangerous culture, says Michelle Deitch with the UT Prison and Jail Innovation Lab.
When you've got a situation where there is no accountability, then other officers pick up on the fact that, oh, I guess that's okay. I guess that's normal. I guess that's expected.
And it can keep going and expanding because more people feel like this is what's expected.
Steve Sinclair is the former head of the Washington State Department of Corrections.
That's what's got to change. You can't act this way. You must show restraint.
Sheriff, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you.
It's all taken place under the watch of Ed Gonzalez, Harris County Sheriff.
What's your reaction to all this?
Well, first, I appreciate you bringing the information forward. I think my track record is one that, we always do try to identify whenever there's an issue. We understand that there's a lot of things that we may do right, but there's times when we're going to fall short.
Consider this. Over 4 years, more detention officers got punished for poor attendance or bringing a cell phone inside the jail than for striking an inmate in the head.
Sheriff, you rarely discipline these detention officers. Why?
I think that when we're talking about excessive use of force at a macro level, there has been discipline. So if you're singling out just strikes to the head, then in that category, yes, I think that we weren't firm enough or clear enough to really address that part of it.
The sheriff's office didn't address inmates struck in the head, even when those cases were criminal. Like this one, an inmate crouched in a corner, covering his head.
Unbelievable. The inmate was not a threat to that officer in any way. And that was just flat out abuse.
Records show that detention officer later got criminally charged with assault, and he's not alone. A half dozen others also were charged after striking inmates in the head, but how many were disciplined? None.
How can a detention officer be charged with assaulting an inmate and still stay on the job?
I think we allow there to be a review by the district attorney's office, a grand jury to determine if there's going to be indictment on them.
But before they were indicted, every one of those detention officers went on to punch other inmates in the head, 4 to 5 times in one case, 12 times in another, even an inmate struck 35 times.
A better decision would probably be to remove an individual in that type of situation off the floors. They should have been pulled off the floor.
LaThomas Brown was never pulled off the floor after this report says he punched an inmate 9 times. Why? In his own words, Brown wrote the inmate threw his breakfast at him.
Mr. Brown.
Outside court,
I'd like to talk to you about your assault case.
he had nothing to say.
Getting breakfast thrown on you, does that justify repeatedly punching someone in the head? Mr. Brown?
After that punching case, he went on to strike 3 other inmates in the head. Despite all of those, Brown later got a favorable job review. His supervisor even said he could become a great field training officer.
It's important for us to make sure that that frontline supervision is doing their job and using their best judgment, looking to see if we could be doing this much better. And like I said, there's things that we can obviously be doing better.
Inside the walls of the Harris County Jail, there are many questions. Why so much violence? Why so little discipline? Under questionable circumstances, detention officers punch inmates in the head and get away with it 4 times a week. But why did it take an inmate's death to bring the hammer down?
You shouldn't have to lose your child because they're sitting in jail.
Jakari Simmons was her child, the youngest son in a family of 7. He'd been in and out of jail since 17.
Everybody makes mistakes. You understand what I'm saying? Some are bigger than the others, some are smaller than others. But just because our children got in trouble doesn't mean they're animals or that they should go in and not come back out.
Simmons went in on a felony weapons charge just a few days before the 2021 winter freeze. Every day he called his mom from jail. Then the phone stopped ringing.
Well, maybe they just not letting them use the phone because of the storm. That's what we took it as. The next day, still no phone call. And I'm like, okay, now I'm worried.
LaRonda Biggle says the next call from Harris County came from a jail chaplain who told her, unfortunately, there was an accident with your son.
I knew it wasn't an accident at that very moment. It came to me instantly. Something went wrong in there. Somebody did something.
Something went very wrong. After Simmons flooded the toilet in his cell one morning, detention officers stripped him naked, and one dropped his knee on Simmons' head using his full weight. That officer, Eric Morales, is 6'5" and 300 pounds.
My son was 5'3", weighing in about 128 pounds.
He was a little guy.
Yeah, he was very little.
For the next 8 hours, Simmons would lie naked in a 50-degree cell in the middle of a winter storm. When dinner came, records show he threw a food tray and lunged at an officer. In response, a clothes fish strike to the face, 4 to 5 blows to the face from 2 other officers, and 2 to 3 punches to the head from another. He also was slammed into the wall and slammed into the ground, basically having to be carried to the clinic because his legs had buckled from under him. The next day, Jakari Simmons died.
They abused their authority. Their conduct toward Mr. Simmons was reprehensible.
Sheriff Ed Gonzalez later fired 11 detention officers and suspended 6 others. 4 of them had struck Simmons in the head.
Why did it take an inmate's death, Sheriff, for you to take such serious action?
Because it was a very serious situation. We looked at it closely, and it was very troubling. And our condolences go out to his family.
He took something dear from me, very, very dear to me.
Simmons' mother says it would never have gotten that far if the sheriff had taken a harder line in the past.
Look at that.
We shared with her what we found over 4 years. 810 inmates struck in the head, only 10 detention officers disciplined.
What message does that send if there's no accountability?
That they could just keep doing it over and over again and nothing's gonna happen because nothing happened to him and nothing happened to him. Nothing gonna happen to me either. If there was accountability, then we wouldn't be here right now. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
And there has been some discipline. Now, perhaps it wasn't as strong as it needed to be. Maybe our reviews haven't been as robust as they have. But to simply say that we allow it and we tolerate it and somehow we might encourage it or accept it, I don't think that's 100% accurate.
A grand jury held one detention officer accountable, indicting Eric Morales for manslaughter in Jakari Simmons' death. The family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Morales, other detention officers, and Harris County.
People behave differently when they know that there are very serious consequences.
Quinn Rollins is the Simmons family attorney.
Harris County is going to have a choice. They're going to have a choice. And part of this lawsuit is about making them have a choice about whether or not they're going to continue to operate with business as usual or continue or start making some real changes so the officers know that they're within a system that will hold them accountable.
Struck again and again. Case after case of behavior called into question.
I'm very clear that there's room for improvement. We obviously have a lot of work to do.
Sheriff Ed Gonzalez concedes what we discovered inside his jail is concerning. More than 800 inmates punched in the head over 4 years for things like refusing orders, grabbing a detention officer, or making verbal threats.
Would any of those categories, in your mind, warrant a closed fist blow to the head?
Those type of scenarios to me would not.
Yet detention officers deliver those blows 4 times a week at the Harris County Jail. To help understand why, you have to start at the beginning, when they signed up for the job.
Before new recruits walk these hallways on their own, they get weeks of training to become a detention officer. But what are they taught about punches to the head? We found nothing in writing, nothing in Harris County policies or training manuals that spell out the do's and don'ts of striking an inmate in the head.
If I were an officer who was reading this policy, I would not understand that that kind of behavior is unacceptable. And a major conference that
Michelle Deitch at the University of Texas has researched jail policies across the nation.
It's missing some key elements and missing necessary guidance for the officers so they know what is allowable and what isn't.
Steve Sinclair is a consultant who used to run the Washington State prison system. His message to Sheriff Gonzalez:
You need to communicate right now and reestablish what's okay and not okay. You need to get to work on your policy. Take a look around the country.
Around the country, some jail policies are much more clear. New York City prohibits the use of blows to the head unless an officer is in imminent danger of serious bodily injury. Los Angeles County only allows head punching during life-threatening or high-risk assaultive situations. And in Texas, Bexar County's policy says strong blows to the head could be considered deadly force and should only be used when deadly force is appropriate. So we asked Sheriff Gonzalez directly,
Please clear it up. What are the rules for a detention officer to use a closed fist and strike an inmate in the head?
From a training perspective, we do not teach to strike to the head. There are some policies that are more descriptive in prohibiting it. And so we are currently revising our policies as a follow-up to the information you brought forward.
As for the low numbers of officers disciplined for striking inmates in the head,
we appreciate you bringing it to our attention so that we can do better in that regard. If we're not If we're not issuing the proper discipline or elevating this to a higher level, we are now.
If you don't discipline, if you don't spell out the do's and don'ts of head strikes in your policies and in your training, what message is that sending the troops?
It sends the wrong message if we're not clearly spelling out the expectations.
Improving training isn't the only change the sheriff plans to make. We discovered the department hasn't followed its own policy. It requires division commanders to submit an annual report detailing patterns or trends involving use of force.
Nobody has written these reports for the last 7 years since you took office.
We need to do better, and I think the reports would be a good practice, and we need to bring those back.
For all of the shortfalls, Sheriff Gonzalez says there is context to consider. The Harris County Jail is overcrowded and chronically short-staffed. Inmates stay longer because of court backlogs and delays. Many have assaultive pasts or are charged with violent crimes, all making for a high-stress, tension-filled place to work.
I'm very empathetic that they have a very difficult job, and they deal with a lot of heavy stuff every single day. Nonetheless, the public expects us to run a safe and respectful jail. That's my expectation.
If a safe and respectful jail is the expectation, getting there is the challenge.
Obviously, there's more work to be done, and so we're definitely going to be taking some further action based on the information that you brought forward.